and welcome to our program Where God Weeps, a program where we talk about the situation of the suffering and persecuted church around the world. The slums around Nairobi are some of the largest in the whole continent. Thousands of families live in extreme poverty in these areas. Is it possible for these men and women to leave these conditions? Can a family move out of the slums to a better life? Mr. Frederick Olweny has dedicated his life as a volunteer to work with the Franciscan Sisters in the area, and he will have some answers for us. Frederick, thank you for being with us in our program.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jonas.
Frederick, you're mostly dedicated to young people in the slums around Nairobi.
Yes, I've worked through the Franciscan Missionary Sisters for Africa. They have a number of projects that I've been involved with. One is the youth project called the Education for Life program, and the other one is what we call Hands of Hope and Care. And Hands of Hope and Care is a program that is trying to empower the youth, empower their parents as well. Maybe I give you a little bit of genesis of how Hands of Care and Hope started in the slums, because that's the one that is really in the slums. Education for Life is a national program, so we visit many dioceses and many parishes, and we conduct youth formation trainings. But specific to Hands of Hope and Care in the slums, there's a sister started a program in the slums of feeding the children who are from the dump site, so they were not going to school, and nobody cared about them. So she was walking around in Kariobangi and saw quite a number of children. In Kariobangi, there's a very big dump site where people come and throw dust and throw all kinds of wastage there. So these boys will go scavenging for what they can sell. So she was very concerned, and these were boys ages from as low as age 4, 5, 6, 7. So she started some kind of a drop-in center where they would come and just have something to eat. Later on, she started thinking loud, these children are not going to school. Is there something else we can do for them in addition to feeding them? And that's how this program started, really to help the young people loitering the streets who are at the dump site. Their lives were exposed, constantly abused by different people. And she started an informal schools. So a number of these children would come to the informal place, get some food, and then they'll be given certain lessons. It was not easy to keep them in class. You know, they are used to earning. They are used to selling metals. They're used to selling a few things that they have scavenged from the dump site.
Because that's the way you're living.
Yes, that's how they were living. In fact, some of them were living at the dump site, no homes.
Where are the parents, Frederick?
Very interesting question. The parents were there, and there are quite a number of parents like that, but sometimes they'd go for 1 week without seeing their children. They would be either looking for jobs, or some of them would actually be on drugs themselves. And so the children were parenting themselves. So the sister started this school, and later on, anyway, the school grew, and it's one of the best schools now in the slums, primary school that is. And then there was also need to start a secondary school. So right now we have 2 schools, St. Francis and St. Clair, primary and secondary schools, and it has really changed the life of these children. Many children continue to go there from the slums, particularly. That's part of the criteria, that you must be from the slums, from a very poor family, marginalized, probably in difficulties. So we started a program within that of answering that question. How can we support these children? Because some were not very active in school. After a while, they'll go back to the slums. So we did out what we call a needs assessment survey was carried out, just to determine what's actually the problem. And there was a disconnect between the parents and their children. So later on, through the support of a number of donors, we started a program called Responsible Parenting Program. And this program has turned that school around. It's part of the reason why There's even now a secondary school that have come up. And the idea was to look at how can we empower these parents so that they play their rightful role in the life of their children.
So they are interested in the children. It's not that they neglect them because they're not interested
I
in
think
them.
life has pushed them to the wall. They're in the slums. They don't know where the food is going to come from. A number of them have 4, 5, 6, 7 children who they have to support. And they're surviving on what we call casual jobs. And casual jobs in Kenya would pay you what? About $2, about €2, actually, 2 to 3 euros, if you're lucky. So how are you going to feed 6 children on 2 to 3 euros? This was one of the major dilemma. So this project started, Effective Parenting, had different components. One was basically to train some of the parents on issues of parenting. What we discovered was very interesting. Some of these parents were born in the slums and also didn't have such a strong connection with their own parents. Mm-hmm. So these are people who are born in the slums, or they have come from the village, rural areas, looking for jobs in town, and they find themselves at the slum.
Give us an idea of the dimension of these slums. How big are they?
Slums, a typical slum within that area would probably have 60,000 to 30,000 people living in it. So if you look at those slums that Hands of Hope and Care is trying to serve, I estimate that there could be about 300,000 people living there.
Under what conditions?
Yeah, very bad conditions. I mean, the houses are not there. People are living in metallic houses. They are living in cardboard. You know, the cardboard. If it rains, it's terrible, because now.
The cardboard will be completely destroyed with
yes.
With the
So
rain.
These are the problems. And at some times when the fire breaks out in the slums, because of the nature of the slum itself, it's even very difficult for the, what's that called, the fire brigade people to come and offer any service. So many times the people in the slums are exposed to a lot of abuse, and that's also where you find a number of people selling drugs. And the crime sometimes is very high, and all kinds of crimes. And so this is part of the problem. This is really part of the problem. And so the parents, through this responsible parenting program, I guess by now close to 2,000, almost 2,000 parents have gone through this phase. So they start with a few weeks of just an orientation of the course, and then they get into parenting sessions like that. And thereafter, the parents are helped to go through understanding children's rights, their own rights, and looking at how can they carry out basic advocacy in the slum level. How can they work so that they safeguard the rights of children and the rights of the mothers and their own rights, which is often violated, both children and their parents. And after that, they're given some certain skills on business, and they are now linked to a micro-saving and credit facility where they become members, and they are able to borrow some money from there to start their own businesses.
And for the children themselves,
Yes.
besides education,
Yes.
their academic preparation, do they receive some other formation, like
Yes.
human values, Christian values,
Yes.
or even religion classes?
Yes.
Catechism?
The sisters have championed all this. They're in the forefront. Apart from just the academic-oriented courses, these children are given quite a number of formation courses. They in different classes, they go through the character formation programs. They are linked to ways in which they can better their talents. And believe you me, some of them come now on national television as through the different either sports or different nurturing talents, and we can see them there. But we are also seeing them much more responsible from the aggressive, militant young person that you pick from the dump site. By the time now they are through with school, as they go through school, they really transform, and you can see that. Even interest in religion, interest in going to church. As you know, it's not necessarily that they only pick the Catholic children. We even have Muslims in school. A few of the Muslims are also at the dump site. They're struggling the same thing. So you find Muslims and different religions. And all of them don't have a problem.
And they receive also the benefits
Yes.
of this ministry.
Yes, they do.
Now do you mention the Muslim presence? There have been some really terrible incidents
Yes.
of Islamic extremists
Yes.
attacking people in Kenya.
Yes.
can you see this harboring, this tension, harboring in the slums, or it's not prevailing in these areas?
Right now, it's not to that extent, but like you have already observed, we have this fundamentalist trying to recruit. And I think it's very easy to recruit young people from the slums because they are very vulnerable. If you promise them a good life elsewhere without them understanding what you're talking about, if you give them money, it's very easy. And we have had situations like that where a number of young people are being recruited to join the fundamentals, to join the
Al-Shabaab?
Yes, the Al-Shabaab. We have Kenyans who have joined Al-Shabaab, and basically it's because of this kind of problem.
So more than really a religious conviction, it is about getting some economic.
Yes, it's about
benefit.
survival sometimes. Sometimes survival in the slums is not an easy thing. But I also want to say this, for the longest time, and Kenya still continue to live with the Muslims peacefully, and this has been for many years. You must have heard of an incident where the terrorists attacked a bus from the northern part of Kenya.
Of course.
And the person who saved...
In Mandara.
Yes, Mandera. And the person who saved was actually a Muslim who tried to save the Christians. And in the course of it, the person lost their life. You probably heard of that story.
Yes.
So people live in harmony, in peace. But you know, the fundamentalists will always try to plant chaos anywhere they want to. Even within their own Muslim brothers and sisters, they still do that. So those are a few cases we have had. Yeah.
But going back to the slums then.
Yes.
You're working with the parents.
We work a lot
you're
with the
working
parents.
with the education of children.
Yes.
Now, what about with young men and women that are involved in drugs? How do you deal with that?
There's a program within Hands of Hope and Care. There's a sister, probably here from Ireland, Sister Miriam Duggan. You've probably heard the name. Sister Miriam Duggan is right now in Kenya, working in that
Yes,
same project, and she started a program on trying to transform, helping young people go beyond hatred, go beyond the aggression, to look deep within themselves, and a program on education for life and character formation. And quite a number of young people have graduated, and later on those who have gone through this formation are able to identify some of the courses they like to do, and with a little bit of support here and there, I know quite a number of them that are in either learning masonry, tailoring, something that could give them skills to earn a decent living. So I'm a strong believer in giving young people a second chance. And I've seen some extreme, I remember a situation where we were working with 40 young people all of them who are involved in criminal activities. They didn't have, close to all of them had experiences of using guns to terrorize and to steal. And so they were going through this rehabilitation process. It wasn't an easy thing. It's often very difficult, but I could see a number of them who stopped crime and are engaged in decent.
You have successful stories.
There are
of this
plenty
program.
of successful stories. Even if you invite people, they'll be able to tell you, this is where I was, this is where this program met me, and this is who I have become.
What could you say are the main, if we can call, threats for the family in Kenya, and then we can extend it to Africa?
Right. Families are very unique, even within Kenya, and the threats might be different. So what I'm going to probably share what I think are the general threats. One of them, I think, is coming in Africa in a very big way, is the whole deconstruction of the meaning of family. And we are finding organizations willing to sponsor and support programs that are really not geared towards building the family as we know it.
For example?
For example, there's a whole organizations that are willing to do what we call sex education in schools, and this sex education sometimes is offered to children even at the age of 10, and they are not really in tandem with what we know in Africa. Trying to teach a 10-year-old how to put in a condom isn't that what we are used to. Trying to demonstrating in front of 10-year-old children with probably a wooden organ, penis, how to how to overcome HIV/AIDS by masturbating. Those are not tendencies we are used to. And I would imagine that there are quite a number of ways in which the whole issue of complementarity of the sexes isn't seen like that. We are seeing a situation where there's a philosophy of competition between man and woman. And this is not auguring well for generally for family life. And we are seeing quite a lot of these threats.
Frederick, usually the parents migrate for economic reasons.
Yes.
Particularly in your country, that thank God at the moment there is no war, there is peace, let's say.
Yes.
But poverty is quite prevailing in the majority of the population. So people leave to get more means to support their family.
It's true.
What happened to the family without a father, without a mother, or without both parents?
And what you have said is quite true, and it's a unique situation that you're seeing. 50 or so years ago, that wasn't the Africa. That was in Africa, a parent, if you're a child was for the whole community. If, God forbid, you lose your father, the uncles will step in to help, and that was not a problem. Children were for the community. Anybody would contribute to make sure that the child grows. The saying in Africa that you are because I am, and because I am, so you are. Ubuntu mindset. But that has changed over the years right now. There are certain unconfirmed studies that are even saying that within Nairobi alone, we could be having more than 40% of households being single-headed, mostly women-headed. And so this is a reality. We are beginning to understand that there are different types of families that will be embraced as opposed to what we are used to before. We are having single-headed families. We are having, children taking care of themselves in certain situations. The parents have died. The aunties and the uncles are not available. So you find those child-headed families that we also have. This is coupled with the fact that many people also succumbed to HIV and AIDS, and that made things a little bit worse, yes. So there are those unique situations, families in difficulty, yes.
What can you do? What is the church doing to help this very, very difficult challenge?
I think the church is doing a lot. Most of the programs that we are talking about are spearheaded by the church. So in that regard, and there are so many movements and associations, and the whole issue of a small Christian community involvement in the life of the people around you. So in that regard, the church have come up with programs. The church is trying to support, especially Christians. Let me be specific to the Catholic Church, because we have also certain government support for the elderly, for children who are orphans, for such groups. So many times we find that the church is working with the government to see how to respond to these social needs of the people. And where the government is not reaching, believe you me, the church will always be there. In Kenya, we normally say that it's easier for the church to reach the people than for the government to reach the people. If you want the message to spread in Kenya, try using the church channels, not necessarily the government channels. So in that regard, especially the Catholic Church, these are estimates that the Catholic Church in Kenya is almost doing 40% of health services. When you come to education...
Of the whole country?
Of the whole country, yes. There are areas where it is only the Catholic Church that is providing social services. The government is yet to reach there. If you go to places like Turkana, for the longest time, they have only known the Catholic Church. The remote parts of Kenya, they have only known, that's where the church will be found. And I think that's a profound thing the church has been doing, trying to be available where the government is not there and where the people have needs. If you talk of education in Kenya, the best schools are run by the Catholic Church in Kenya, that even the government officials would like their children to go to those schools. Yes, so the church is available in terms of providing school services, but the church is also available where the poor and the marginalized are. If you go to the slums, many of these schools that have been set up by the church. If not the Catholic Church, then maybe the Anglican Church and the other churches. So in that regard, I think the church is doing a lot, trying to be available to where be available where the people are. Really see people as the body of Christ in suffering. And I think in that regard, the church has done very well. Of course, with a lot of difficulties, a lot of financial challenges, resource challenges, but they have tried to be available. In fact, I'm seeing more and more in Kenya, churches becoming the centers of life. And even for myself, the first area where you encounter civilization is the church. You go to the church, that's the first group you ever belong to. From your home, the next group, you meet the church. You are either an altar boy or you are in the youth group, and there's a lot of learning. And so you'll find that in many of the African countries, quite a number of our leaders, presidents, name them, they got their education through the church. In my own country, quite a number of my former president, Kibaki, was educated through the church. Mm-hmm. And even the current president, Uhuru, will tell you that
received Catholic education. And so in that regard, I would imagine the church tries to be available as much as possible. But we also take, I think quite a number of countries in Africa are improving economically. Despite all the challenges, I think it's only in Africa where you find that quite a number of countries have growth, the domestic product that is positive and is growing. And we thank God for that. Hopefully that should translate into better quality of life. For everybody. Yeah. Yes. Corruption notwithstanding. Frederick, I want to talk another topic is to end our conversation. And it is well known that nowadays the concept of family has been reinforced by Africa, yes, by the church in Africa. Yes. It's like the last bastion of strong family values.
Yes.
How do you see this to be projected into the whole world? How do you feel as an African man, as an African father?
Yes, yes.
How do you feel bringing that to the world?
Well, Africa has received a lot. Let me start from there. Africa has received a lot from the world, particularly Ireland. I was baptized by an Irish priest those many years. And I think I used to ask myself a question. Ireland is a very tiny country. How did it manage to send so many missionaries to Africa? And I think I can see a number of missionaries from Africa also coming to Europe. But as they come, as Africa grows, I think Africa is at the right time also to share with the whole world some of our own values that have made people stick together despite all the challenges that have come. I think it's in Africa that I see, with all the challenges that are there, families still come together. And particularly, I've seen the role now the church has played, even with the rural families now not being what they are. The church is trying to provide an alternative to what the rural family was like. I'm the chairperson of our, what we call the small Christian community, where we live, about 10, 15 families come together. So we meet every week for prayers and for sharing on issues that touch on our own life. So we invite people to share with us about parenting. We invite couples to share with us. Those are the things that used to happen in the rural traditional setup, where people used to have conversations like that. Since that's not happening, I can see the church is taking over that role. Something very interesting is happening, especially in Kenya, and I think it's in other countries. In the traditional African setup, there are what we call the rites of passage. You have heard about the rites of passage, circumcision of boys.
From childhood to adulthood.
Yeah. While it's a very good idea, but sometimes the practice wasn't that. Whatever the teaching sometimes were a little bit questionable. Now the church has come up with an alternative rites of passage, where these young people will come, they are given formation on character development. As long as there's a medical personnel who will be available to do the circumcision part. So they finish the circumcision part, but then the young men are in a camp for a period of time going through the rite of passage, but in the Christian sense, where they are taught values, a bit of catechism, they are taught issues of character, they are taught values on how to respect, live with their parents, respect each other, appreciate achievement, such basic values. And for me, that's a good way in which the church is trying to respond. How do we, we are talking about inculturation. How do we inculturate a practice and I believe very good, but probably is not in line with our Christian practice? What can we do about it? So there are two ways. You can either choose to condemn it, or get involved in a way that you can almost sanctify it, if you like. And we have quite a number of such practices. But I also see the church, it's not just a question of being spiritual. The church is involved in helping people improve the quality of their lives. And I think I've said that. There are so many areas where the church is teaching Christians on how to do better farming, teaching Christians on how to get water. I know so many areas where there are projects on sustainable livelihood, projects on human rights. So in that regard, I think, yes, there's trying to be
it's
holistic.
really inspiring to hear
Yes.
you
Yes.
sharing all this good news
Yeah,
from Africa. That
Yes,
because
so we have
sometimes
experienced,
we need to hear about this.
I
We
wish
hear too much of the bad
there's
side.
a lot of negativity, but a lot of positive things are happening in
Yes.
Africa. Well, I imagine you journalists, without accusing you, if they say that if a dog bites a man, it's no good news. But if a man bites a dog, you'll report it.
Definitely.
So that's what I hear about journalists. So I think there's a lot happening in Africa. And when I project into the future, Africa probably will be the continent for referral. Looking at, let's go learn what is happening in Africa. But the challenge also is, before we copy too much what we see in the West, because that's also happening. There's plenty of things we can copy from the West. But unfortunately, there are other things that we need to be very careful. I think it's important to learn the lessons the West have learned.
Yes.
You don't have to go the distance that the West have gone to learn those lessons. Otherwise, we'll be in danger. We need really to learn.
Yeah, you have to. Africa has to learn from the
Yes.
mistakes of
Yes.
other continents. Frederick, thank you so much
Yes.
for sharing this time with us and this really positive, uplifting news from Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us in another program of Where God Weeps. If you want to know more about the work that the church is doing in Africa, we encourage you to contact the information at the end of this program. Thank you, and God bless.